A very good evening to you. Tonight, we focus yet again on corruption, and this time at the very core of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The chair is under investigation tonight. We have all the details for you on that, and that is why it is the basis of our big question tonight. And we're asking you, should the EACC chair, Philip Kinisu, step aside to allow a probe into his dealings with the National Youth Service? Should the EACC chair, Philip Kinisu, step aside to allow a probe into his dealings with the National Youth Service? SMSs your yes or no feedback to the number 22155. It is absolutely free. You can also send us a tweet at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag to use is Monday Night News. We will have the details of that story and much more, including a conversation with the Cabinet Secretary of Foreign Affairs here in Kenya, Ambassador Amina Mohammed. She is live with Abby Agina in just a short while. You're watching Monday Night News. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole. Let's take a look at the top stories tonight. Hunting the hunter. EACC chair now faces corruption probe.
We don't need help. What we need are partners. Let the agencies come and partner with us.
The big trade talks begin. We are live with Amina Mohammed.
When pictures came in from the ground, that is Buna, people really saw that this is an issue that is happening.
Help at last for Abshir, but just how many are still out there?
The Kenya government to at least give us time to complete our education.
And to Somalia and back, the anxiety of one refugee girl. Good evening. Let's begin here in Nairobi, where the country's anti-corruption agency is in the eye of yet another storm. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has now begun investigating its own chairman, Philip Kinisu, over alleged dealings with the National Youth Service. The EACC has enlisted the help of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the Asset Recovery Team to probe the chairman. Kinisu's family is believed to have received some 35 million shillings from business done with NYS. Murimi Mwangi begins our coverage with the latest storm at Integrity Center.
The entry of Philip Kinisu into Integrity House was seen as a new beginning at the anti-graft agency that is largely known for its controversies rather than the fight against corruption. Kinisu, who ought to be leading the charge against corruption, now has to face the multi-agency team, seeking to find out if he or his family benefited from the proceeds out of transactions with the controversial NYS. NYS is itself being probed by the EACC over several claims of grand corruption. The probe follows a complaint filed by a civil society group, Bunge la Mwananchi, that Saki Limited, a company owned by Kinisu's wife, allegedly pocketed 35 million shillings, which was part of the 791 million shillings loot of the infamous National Youth Service scam. A statement from the EACC says Kinisu has admitted that the company indeed exists and that he was a director, but has since resigned from that role. Preliminary investigations undertaken by the EACC, excluding Kinisu, revealed that indeed business had been transacted between the said company and NYS, as well as other government agencies. In a letter dated 15th July, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution directed that a forensic investigation warrants the formation of the multi-agency team comprising the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the Assets Recovery Unit, and the Kenya Revenue Authority. Kinisu is due to hold a news conference over the matter on Tuesday morning as yet another cloud of uncertainty grips Kenya's anti-corruption headquarters. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News, Nairobi.
And that story forms the basis of our big question here tonight on Monday Night News. We're asking you, should the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Chair, Philip Kinisu, step aside to allow for a probe into his dealings with the National Youth Service? Should he step aside to allow for a probe into that? Please send us a text message. The number is 22155. Start with a yes or no. And please leave us your name and your location as well on Twitter at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag is Monday Night News. We look forward to hearing from you and sampling your views throughout this live newscast. All right, now I want to talk about that big global conference being hosted by Kenya here in Nairobi. Up to 7,000 delegates are gathering in the city this week for one of the most important trade summits in the United Nations calendar. Later on, we will be speaking to Kenya's Cabinet Secretary in charge of international trade, Ambassador Amina Mohamed. But first, let's give you a sense of what kind of meeting we're talking about. We want to focus on some of the numbers that are interesting to just make you understand why this is such a big deal and why this is indeed very important. We're calling it UNCTAD by the numbers. So first of all, like we said, it is 7,000 delegates who have congregated in Nairobi. We say 7,000 plus because if you want to take a look at the numbers, they're most likely here with a number of their teams. So these are 7,000 plus delegates who are in the country for the UNCTAD 14 summit, and they all come from 47 countries. They're representing 47 countries present in Nairobi as we speak. How much money is being injected into the economy at this time? Those 7,000 delegates from 47 countries are believed to spend about 6 billion Kenya shillings. This is the estimated amount of money that will be spent up until Friday this week. And of course, like we said, it's 6 billion shillings. It's being spent over a period of 6 days in the country. That's from the 17th up until the 21st. That is the duration of the summit in Kenya. And of course, you know by now that this has made a closure of 7 roads in the capital. Traffic seems to be moving slowly. So all of these numbers that you see, when you take a look at the 7 roads, as Parliament Road, Harambee Avenue, Taifa Road, City Hallway, Standard Street, Mama Ngina Street, and Wabera Street. This is UNCTAD by the numbers, so you can take a look at just what this means. But for greater detail, Abby Agina will be speaking to the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in just a moment. But before we get to that conversation, Abby Agina has spent the better part of the day at the UNCTAD meeting, and he now reports on the first day of Real Talks.
Delegates walked into a packed agenda as Kenya began playing host to this global meeting for the second time in 40 years. With aid and trade taking center stage, the Kenyatta International Conference Center is at the apex of global diplomacy.
The Global Sustainable Development Goals agenda was an emerging consensus of finding inclusive solutions to global challenges. That none of us an island unto themselves without engaging the rest of humanity. The challenges that global goodwill has encountered in the past year do not negate the call for international solidarity.
President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was among the heads of state to address the delegates, took a swipe at humanitarian agencies. He wants a more proactive approach in engaging with African countries, which are no longer aid-reliant, but are transitioning into trade partners with prior donor countries.
First and foremost, let it be a partnership. We don't need help. What we need are partners. Let the agencies come and partner with us.
What I can say is that Africa is the next frontier. Africa is not only a place where we have peacekeepers and humanitarian actors. Now we can see that Africa can be a partner even for business for the United Nations, and most of all, Africa can be a place where core business of the UN can be done from.
Africa's assertive stance, however, is not going unchallenged.
We need to work together to reform the UN system so that it is inclusive and it is truly a partnership.
Developed countries continue to entrench their hold on the global economy.
So the system cannot be one where you just sit there and you wait for benefits and you wait for things to come to you and you wait for handouts. The system has to work with you. You have to be part of the system. If you want the system to work for you, you have to make the system better. You have to contribute to the system.
That money that we send, FAO going to respond to a disaster in Kenya or to feed the refugees in that. No, that's not what you should be doing. Let's use that money to help empower those people, to help them set up their farms, to help, as my friend in ITC said, get value addition going. Then they'll feed themselves. Then they won't have to wait for you to bring the food. They'll feed themselves and probably feed others in the process. This is the way I believe we need to really look at this challenge.
The push to have fairer global trade practices is set to dominate the talks as various countries challenge the dominance of the Western nations, which they accuse of profiteering from a skewed trade landscape in Africa.
Nationalism cannot surrender in the face of short-term opportunism.
Agricultural production remains a key sticking point, with women and youth at the eye of this trade storm. With the theme of the conference being from decisions to actions, observers wait to see whether indeed any concrete action comes out of the conference or whether it remains yet another talk shop. Abi Agina, KTN News in Nairobi.
Well, from that particular report, we now want to speak to the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Amina Mohamed. Of course, Nairobi has been a beehive of activity beginning yesterday as we host this 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Perhaps just demystify for us what the whole aspect around UNCTAD is.
Well, UNCTAD is the main organ of the United Nations that deals with issues around trade and development. It was set up a while back, and the reason was because there was a clear need to link trade and development. I think you've heard it said that trade is an engine for development. This is not new. This is something that was actually seen a long time ago, and that's why it was felt necessary to link these two and have an organization that dealt with it. But that's not the only history of UNCTAD. Actually, the UNCTAD was born out of the frustrations that the rest of the world had in setting up an international organization that would formulate rules and set rules for trade. And actually, when that whole idea was diverted and a smaller body was formed to do that, then it was felt that we actually needed a multilateral, universal body that could address the concerns of mostly developing countries and least developed countries when it came to issues trade and development.
All right. Well, Ambassador, looking at this particular conference, of course, the question on many Kenyans' minds is what do they stand to benefit? If you are to talk to the broader society, the Wanjikus, the Otienos, what are they likely to gain out of this conference?
Well, you've just seen the figures. You saw the figures, 6 billion that we are getting out of hosting this conference. But not just that.
But does it trickle down really?
Absolutely, absolutely. It trickles down all the way to the Mama Mboga, right? To the logistics and transportation companies, whether it is our taxis, whichever form it takes, Uber or the others. It trickles down. The hotels are full. You go into any of the hotels in Nairobi now, there's no space. So yes, it trickles down. And those hotels basically sell food that is grown on our farms and is sold in our markets. And then obviously there's also the added, benefit of travel during, after, right, and before the conference. So ample, benefits for Kenyans. But more importantly, it sets Nairobi up as a negotiating city, right? As a city where negotiations actually do take place, as a city where the international community comes to engage, the members come to engage with each other. You just saw a clip of the Leaders Summit, and I can tell you that it was streamed live all over the world, and I got feedback from across the world, right? And so, it just sets us up as a premium destination for conferencing, which is the reason why for us in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it is so important, because it's one of the pillars of His Excellency's foreign policy.
Speaking about foreign policy, we've seen competition hotting up in the region. A lot of countries, Ethiopia, South Africa, we are sort of living in a dynamic environment where competition is on the higher end. So looking at Kenya and this particular trade talks, what is in it in terms of key areas of priority? What will be Kenya's case as we participate during this UNCTAD 14?
Actually, it is the first conference of this kind to take place after the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, right? So basically, it's the conference that is going to set the pace, right, and the tone for the implementation of the SDGs. And you heard the language that was being used. It's about partnerships. We don't want any help. Africa and the global south as a whole is a rich part of the world, right? And it is only going to get wealthier and healthier, right? And therefore, we don't want help. We want partnerships. It's about making collective decisions to address common challenges that we have. Poverty exists everywhere, right? Problems that we face with development, with security, in other areas are problems that are global, okay? So for the first time, with the SDGs, with the Sustainable Development Goals, you're beginning to hear language that is not common. That was not the common UN language. The common UN language was what the President was talking about: humanitarian assistance, drought and support for, famine, giving people fish instead of teaching them how to fish, right? So it was about that. But now I think the realization that we have actually come of age, that we have the capacity, and just look at our country. We have the skill set, right, to compete anywhere in the world. Okay, so it's time now to talk about, common challenges, to talk about decisions that we must take together, to talk about inclusivity, to not just impose conditions on the South, but to actually recognize that these are conditions that all of us must adhere to.
Finally, Ambassador, as Kenyans look forward to the climax of this particular conference, this is the World Investment Forum expected to happen. There's the civil societies and also the youth in this particular conference. Perhaps looking at the World Investment Forum, have we received any pledges from the Kenyan business community, as well as the other over 20 CEOs that will be taking part?
Well, it's begun. It began today with the Leaders Summit, and then obviously the fora that have been that have been taking place, the different engagements. We had almost all the UN agencies present, and then of course we had our president. We had the president of Namibia, the vice president of Comoros, the vice president of Uganda. So it was actually today. It was top heavy. Yeah? From now, we're going to start now doing the speed dating, right? To see whether we can match up opportunities with the resources. We're going to listen now again to the investors and see whether there's appetite to actually directly engage. Concrete programs, concrete projects, concrete initiatives, right? Going forward. So I think the story is just beginning to unfold. It's not over yet. The two, I think, critical things that happened is obviously that Kenya is the president of the conference, and is going to be the president for this initial first 4 years of the implementation of the SDGs. It's the most critical period of the implementation of the SDGs, and therefore Kenya again will be setting the tempo, right? It will also be setting the pace for the implementation of the SDGs. So I think those are really, really critical elements that should not be forgotten. But also that was opened, yesterday by our president. And, that was really the highlight of yesterday's activities.
Well, indeed. And Ambassador, final one regarding Africa Union Commission Chair elections. I understand that Kenya will be fronting a candidate. What are our chances as a country in these elections that sort of seem to have stalled?
Well, unfortunately, actually stalled. Very, very unfortunately, because we had 3 excellent African candidates that had invested time. They had invested, energy. They had lobbied. They had traveled across the continent. So it was very unfortunate that one of them was not able to clinch, the position and become our next chair of the AU, which basically means that we delay making this decision for 6 months, right, until January. And so we are hoping that by then there would be either additional candidates, or if these 3 still go forward, that we will actually have the political will.
All right.
Right? Because it's just about actually having the political will to make the right decisions at the right time. Okay? Because also the signal that goes out is not right, that we were not able to find a candidate this time. And it's even not fair to the 3 candidates that put up their they put up their names to be, for consideration. It's always an act of courage to put your name forward. So we're going to wait and see. I think it's premature now to start discussing, who the other candidates or who may come up.
All right.
But we'll be ready to engage as soon as we hear.
Many thanks.
Yeah, who else is going to be on the ticket?
All right. Well, many thanks there. Speaking to Ambassador Amina Mohamed, Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs, just breaking down for us the UNCTAD conference, what Kenya stands to benefit in this particular conference that will be running through the week till Saturday, where a declaration will be issued by the ministers. Well, we now hand you back to Yvonne, who has more from her end.
Thank you very much, Abby. Again, speaking to Cabinet Secretary Ambassador Amina Mohamed. We'll continue with our coverage of the UNCTAD summit here in Kenya. Just a quick one from @Pacific Aziz says, if 6 billion shillings is going to be injected into the country over the period of 6 days, then closing the roads is so worth it. Yes, we're looking forward to the outcome of that summit and to where it takes Kenya and trade in Africa in general. Let's move away from that now and take you to Parliament, where religious leaders pushed for a soft landing of the IEBC commissioners today to ensure there are no legal in the future. The leaders who brokered the formation of a joint select committee were giving their views as the teams began their work in earnest. Our senior political reporter Chris Tairu has more from Parliament.
Or otherwise.
After putting their house in order and agreeing on their terms of reference, the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee, mandated to unlock the IEBC stalemate, got down to business and started collecting proposals from stakeholders. First to appear before the committee was the interreligious leaders who played a major role in bringing both parties together. The group is pushing for an exit plan for the commissioners that is devoid of any legal challenges.
There can be a mechanism of coming to a conclusion about transition even without affirming culpability and finding an acceptable mechanism not to violate the Constitution and the laws in managing the transition.
This mandate must be carried out with absolute urgency to ensure that the leadership of the IEBC is transitioned early enough to allow the new team enough time to prepare for the August 2017 general elections.
We, as the Karanja said, spoke to them, and they said if they will have a clear window of exit, which of course now gravitates towards what Mheshimiwa Murkomen said, we have no problem in prevailing upon those people to exit. Of course, they have alluded to that.
The religious leaders, however, proposed that the commissioners should not be victimized during this process.
I'm worried some activists may soon run to court to stop the proceedings. And that will translate into this committee and the entire nations in a gridlock.
If there is a general drift and agreement towards them accepting to exit, why would we want to still drag the public towards preparing grounds for removal, which sometimes is very difficult, getting evidence, submitting evidence?
For us, the transition is not obvious. We have to listen to the allegations against the commissioners first and the secretariat. And it is only when we find that there are serious allegations which are verified, it is only on that basis we can actually definitely talk about the transition.
The religious leaders are expected to attend a multi-sectoral forum on Tuesday and Wednesday that will bring on board religious organizations, civil society, trade unions, as well as the business community before they adopt their final recommendation regarding the fate of the IEBC.
Come out boldly and tell Kenyans boldly, this is what we need to do, because I think this committee will not do any justice to this country if you do not tell us boldly how we are going to conduct not the 2017 election, but the 2022 election.
We have got no privilege, no liberty, and no luxury of extending the date of the general election, even by 1 day.
Meanwhile, members of the Joint Select Committee have raised a red flag over a similar process being undertaken by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, I don't think it will be outside your mandate to call them for a word of prayer and read that little scripture that you read for us, so that this environment turns out to be a positive environment for the very important assignment that we have.
The Joint Select Committee later met the Kenya Evangelical Alliance and the Hindu Council, who also presented their submissions. The committee now remains with only 3 weeks before presenting their report before both houses for debate and approval. With the opposition code having threatened to go back to the streets and protest over the IEBC stalemate, focus now shifts to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, led by Samuel Chepkonga, to see whether they will stop their proceedings and avoid jeopardizing any gains made by the Joint Select Committee. Chris Dairu, KTN News.
And ODM leader Raila Odinga began his much-publicized tour of the region today with his first stop in Vihiga. Raila says the dissent within his party is no cause for alarm. But as Robert Wanyonyi now reports, the CORD leader insists the disquiet is being instigated by what he calls outside forces.
CORD leader Raila Odinga arrived in Vihiga County for his much-anticipated tour of the western part of Kenya, a region that has of late witnessed internal rebellion within his ODM party. The ODM leader is visiting the area in a bid to lock his support in what is regarded as his support base that appears to be wavering now after the party's Secretary General Ababu Namwamba relinquished his party position. Accompanied by several leaders, Raila proceeded to meet party delegates before commencing on a Meet the People tour in the area.
Hatutatetemeka, hatutaogopa, hatutateteleka, wakati ni huno. Kama si huno ni sasa hivi.
Wakati Raila alikuwa prime minister, kupitia kwake ndio watu wa sehemu hii walikuwa na uongozi na walikuwa na cheo katika nchi hii.
Hii Waluya walikaa wapi ambao Paranya hakuwa? Waluya waliamua kura ijayo tutakaa pamoja tuweke debe moja. Tulikaa wapi?
In spite of the views by many analysts that he's facing perhaps his biggest political rebellion, Raila cut the image of a confident person.
Wanakimbia kanisa hii harambee, shule hii harambee, hii nini harambee. Viongozi wanabeba wanapeleka kwa kule kwa pesa. Lakini hiyo pesa ambayo inakuja nayo harambee ni yenu ambayo wameiba.
He was, however, quick to point out that the internal dissent being witnessed in the party was the works of some outside forces.
Atakuja hapa na hiyo pesa mabunda na kwenye magunia. Hiyo nini? Kuna wengine watakubali kwenda kupiga chini kwa shetani, magoti chini kwa shetani. Lakini nataka mwambia nyinyi ya kwamba mwambia nenda mbali wapi? Nenda mbali wapi?
The ODM leader continues with his tour of Western with a series of rallies within Vihiga County tomorrow. The tour will continue until Saturday this week. Many political observers have taken the tour by ODM leader Raila Odinga in western part of Kenya as one that is meant to stem the internal rebellion, especially in the western part of Kenya. But this is opposed by the party leaders and members, most of who are saying the tour was planned way back before the dissenting voices started being heard in the party. Robert Wanyonyi, KTN News.
Away from politics and now to a sad story from Wajir that could soon have a happy ending. On Friday, KTN News highlighted the plight of Abshir Salat and his story of isolation and neglect in the face of a rare skin condition. Today, well-wishers had him airlifted to Nairobi for specialized treatment. But as our in-house doctor, Mercy Korir, now reports, many other children in Wajir are not yet that lucky.
Abshir Salat's story of isolation and neglect has been a sad and desperate one for 10 years. But today, that story took a different turn when he arrived in Nairobi, scheduled to see doctors at the Kenyatta National Hospital, which is much better equipped to handle his condition than the health facilities in his home county of Wajir. His plight touched the hearts of many on social media, who then took up a collection for medical expenses and to guarantee his travel to Nairobi.
Pictures came in from the ground, that is Buna. People really saw that this is an issue that is happening. So I would like to tell Kenyans that we should go beyond Twitter, to at least go into our villages, into our rural homes, to dig into these issues and then bring it out to so that at least the government can also assist.
But Abshir is not the only one tormented by the skin condition called ichthyosis. Miss Kibule, also from Wajir, already made her trip to Kenyatta and is well on the journey to recovery back at home. Mama Ole's two children, 9-year-old Abdia Hassan and 4-year-old Abdurrahman, are still in Wajir County yet to receive treatment, but hope that their story will be told differently too soon. There could be others out there yearning for help.
I want to send an appeal to the parents and relatives with children like Abshir to actually come out, because they will be helped. There's so much stigma attached to such conditions.
While the condition is considered genetic and not contagious, its reported occurrence in Wajir County has seen the county government isolate a ward in their referral facility to specifically help manage this condition. Though there is no known cure for ichthyosis at the moment, the condition can be managed with the involvement of the relevant specialists. Dr. Mercy Korir, KTN News, Nairobi.
Indeed, hope for those children there. Now to our continuing series on the impending closure of Dadaab. Tonight, Sharon Mamanyi speaks to one girl who has been to Somalia and back. She says she knows exactly what awaits the many girls currently living at the camp when they get to Somalia.
As the clock ticks for the closure of the most famous refugee camp in Kenya, many households here already know what lies ahead, and that is because some of them have been there.
If we go there, what I'm sure is that we will be having kids and we'll be begging on the streets if we go there, because no one will care you.
After 7 years in Dadaab, Rahma Hussein went back to Somalia with her family in August 2015. They moved back willingly. But Rahma wouldn't stay. Early marriage and no education is what her home country had to offer.
As a Rahma now, I have seen everything there. I have encountered a lot. So I'm telling the Kenya government to at least give us, time to complete our education.
This is the story of defiant courage by a refugee girl determined to get an education.
I'm 19 years old. I was born in Mogadishu, especially in Bakara. We fled from there because of the wars, civil wars in Mogadishu. Then we came here 2009, arrived. Then we got registered as refugees. We were staying here at least for 7 years. Then the family decided, after being in the refugees, the family decided again to go back to their country. And it was not my willings and decision, but it was the influence of my parents. I had to go back with them because they told me that they cannot leave me here because of the cultural effects that always hinder cultural education in this refugee.
After 2 months in Somalia with no school, Rahma's father arranged to get her married. She is 19 years old.
My father, he told me, if a girl learns how to write her name and how to add something, that's enough. You don't have to get married, get kids and be somewhere. Then I told them, I believe God, I cannot marry now, and I don't want to marry a man whom I didn't know him, and he's not educated, by the way, he's old, at least 40 or 50 somewhere.
She reached out to her former teachers at the camp with a plea for help.
I discussed with them my problem, all the issues, then they advised me, your parents, they're the ones who are destroying your future in their hands. So you should have to go back to the refugee. We will send for you money, you just go back.
Rahma's thirst for education has grabbed the attention of the world. She received Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani activist for female education and youngest ever Nobel Prize laureate, when she recently visited Dadaab for her 19th birthday.
It would be very difficult for girls to go back and there's no school. And Rahma, she's a clear example. She went, she went back to Somalia. There was no school in her village, in her area, and that's why she came back, because she wanted to get her education.
You cannot walk and buy something for your own. If you go, you will be killed with no reason. Who killed you, you don't know. You are raped, who raped you, you don't know.
Rahma is the face of young refugees who find it difficult to access education. The UN reports that only 50% of refugee children are in primary school and 25% of refugee adolescents in secondary school. It gets worse for the girls.
It's like here in the culture, the girls have to be next to their mothers. So the mothers are not convinced that they can still leave their girls behind and go to Somalia and wait until they finish their education. So that's one of the challenges that we have. And what I think for me is the repatriation will affect the girls, not unless we have proper strategies of ensuring that before we take them out of the camp, we have already established schools in Somalia where they can go and transit.
The most important thing that they are looking for in the camp is education. Back at home in Somalia, there is very limited infrastructure in terms of that provides or supports education, and therefore the youth who are left back in Somalia have no access to formal education.
Many of the refugee youth are yearning for an education that could be the freedom from dependency, yet caught in between a fed-up Kenya and an ill-prepared Somalia. What is the place of the rights to education for refugees and displaced people?
So I cannot be registered as a form for student because I'm not having any document from the agency. I'm not Kenyan, neither refugee.
The uncertainty that is complicating an already painful exodus in the waiting. Sharon Momanyi, KTN News, Dadaab, Garissa County.
Let's take a look at the top stories in the world of business. New motor vehicle sales for the year to June 2016 have shrunk 44.07% as compared to a similar period last year, as the industry continues to feel the heat of a projected slowdown due to a hike in both taxes and bank financing rates. According to the Kenya Motor Industry Association, the new car segment of the market sold a total of 1,105 units, 871 units less than at a similar time last year. And of course, there's a reason why this is important, because vehicle sales are a good indicator of the investment attitude in manufacturing and industry, and this may be taken as an indicator of a slowdown in overall economic performance. Industry leader General Motors saw a drop in sales by 109 units to 415 from 524 previously, even as the rest of the industry took a beating, losing both market share and overall sales figures. Over 2,000 Kenyan students are set to be trained on business leadership skills beginning this week to instill in them employment and entrepreneurship skills. The training will be offered by Enactus Kenya, an organization that promotes entrepreneurship among the youth and which runs international competitions targeting university students in an effort to hone their skills. The organization recently held the 14th Enactus Kenya National Exposition Competition, which brought together at least 2,000 students from 30 Kenyan universities.
I'm very It's been a great experience, and I'm very excited. We are going to change something.
Are very much there and stand ready. Germany as a big development cooperation partner to work together with Kenya in many areas, but we are going to focus especially on youth employment, youth empowerment by education, by training, and I'm very much looking forward to follow this up.
The hard work that we've been putting in and all the sacrifices we've been making, it's been a great experience, and I'm very excited. We are going to change some things here and there to meet actually the standards of the worldwide competition that will be taking place in Toronto, Canada. So I must say that we must start preparing early and we must brace ourselves.
We continue our focus on the dairy industry ahead of the Brookside Breeders' Show and Sale. Now, with dairy farming well established in Kenya, the focus of the industry has now shifted to improving the quality of livestock and improving yields. Today, we bring you the story of Molito Farm in Kiambu County, which has done so well that it is now a farmer training center to improve skills across the industry.
With its udder filled to bursting, this dairy cow named Lily leaves its shed walking in measured steps, as if it's taking part in a beauty contest. It is about 4 p.m. and it's the third time today that its handler is milking the Freshan Holstein cow that is the toast of the farm. Lily produces a total of 60 liters of milk a day from 3 different milkings. Lily indeed is the pride of Molito Farm in Red Hill in Kiambu County.
The important thing about challenging a cow to produce more, you look at the stage of lactation. At the early stages, when the cow has not been inseminated, and that's the time you can challenge this cow to produce more milk, because all the energy priority, it is in the production of milk.
Over the last few years, dairy farming has grown tremendously in Kenya and has been transformed into a fully blown business venture, with many farmers making a good living from dairy farming. But according to Samson, you need to be skilled in a wide range of activities to run a profitable and sustainable dairy business.
We calculate animal feed in terms of the dry matter content. That's what the cow feeds. So, for example, if I have a kilo of hay, I'm looking at how much of the dry matter is in that hay.
Most people practicing dairy farming today are not satisfied with the amount of milk their cow is giving them. Samson advocates for proper training in dairy farming to raise productivity.
If I get 70% of my herd is confirmed in calf, it means I'll need more energy for my herd, for them to produce more milk.
To support training and to diversify revenue, Molito Farm, with the help of Braz Agro, a supplier of on-farm dairy equipment, has opened its doors for other farmers to come and learn the best dairy husbandry while interacting with modern equipment as required before buying high-quality cows. On the day we visited, The farm had received a number of small-scale farmers from Mogogosiek in Bomet County who had come to polish up their dairy husbandry skills.
We have planned a lot about the dairy farming, yes, and we have seen that the dairy farming, what they are doing here is dairy farming as a business.
To ensure that you gain maximum profits from your dairy venture, Samson explains that it's important to drive down the cost of feeds, which account for 40 to 60% of the total cost.
Our cows we feed on concentrates and fodder crop. And fodder crop, this includes the maize silage and the lucerne.
There are several ways in which farmers can drive the cost down. For example, planting their own food. If there is enough land available, farmers can also make their own concentrates, such as dairy meal. There are also few technologies that can help reduce the cost of feed for dairy farming. Philip Keitan for The Next Frontier.
Seven candidates are set to vie for different posts in the upcoming elections of AFC Leopards that is scheduled for the 24th of July at Kasarani. The elections will mark the end of the interim body that has been running the club since 2015 when the club was rocked by in-house wrangles. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, is listed as the electoral body to handle the polls. According to the Electoral Board Chairman Elias Masika, the club is 5 million shillings shy of the 8 million that is needed to conduct the elections. More than 5,000 members drawn from 65 branches have been cleared to vote. Current AFC Leopards Matthews Opora and Daniel Mule will be vying for the chairman position. Also in the race is Robert Asembo and Morris Amahwa.
Upon our verification, the number of members rose to what we have now, 5,294. So the voters who are eligible to vote in the elections on 24th are 5,294. As well, we verified the number of branches. There were 65 branches in all. There are 65 branches of AFC Leopards, but out of these 65, 3 of them never gave any documents for verification.
Tusker FC maintained their 5-point lead at the top of the table after their 2-2 draw with Chemelil Sugar. Defending champions Gor Mahia, on the other hand, failed to cut the gap on leaders after settling on a barren draw with Ashuru FC. Sofapaka placed bottom of the league with only 8 points from 18 matches played so far. Here's a look at the Kenya Premier League standings. All right, we've come to the end of our bulletin tonight. We thank you very much for watching and for your feedback. We look forward to seeing what happens in the coming days with the investigations into the chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Philip Kinisu, over he and his family's dealings with the National Youth Service. One last tweet, Nyagaka Nyakundi says, to head the EACC, you must be without blemish. Otherwise, it won't be long before cartels hang you, even for an old sneeze. Thank you very much for watching our bulletin tonight. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole. Our sign language interpreter was William Silla. Good night.